Sometimes life is yikes.
And that's okay. You're not alone. Welcome to Yikesland. Hi, and welcome to Yikesland, our show about living with and coping with depression and mental illness. I'm Kris, and I'm here with host
Jelani Hoon.
And we are here to talk about our experiences living with depression and mental illness, and remind you that we're not alone. We're all in this together, and if we just take it day by day, we can hopefully make things a little better.
That's right. Thank you so much for coming and joining us here on the podcast. We really appreciate you guys' support out there. Please tell a friend about the podcast. Hopefully our goal is to just let people know and give out this information out there for people to, better utilize this information, our stories. Maybe it'll relate to you guys in some way. And that's what we really want to do, is kind of just let you guys know, like you said, you guys aren't alone. And if you guys want to find out more information about the shows and things we're going to be doing, check out our Twitter handle at Yikesland. And if you guys got any questions or comments or anything like that, you can send us an email at yikesland@gmail.com. How are you doing?
I have had a difficult week. I'm dealing with some family issues right now. I think I mentioned in a previous episode that my sister also deals with depression and mental illness, and she's not doing very well right now. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. I went to visit her, and it's always a little bit difficult. I think we talked a lot about how both of us tend to be people who want to fix other people.
Yeah.
And you can't really fix anybody else. You can help them, but you can't solve everything for them. But sometimes it's kind of that trade-off where you can help somebody, but you don't want to pour so much of yourself into that you kind of destroy yourself trying to save another person. And so I guess I've been dealing with kind of setting boundaries and limits as to, how much I can help, because it's a close family member. Yeah. She's my best friend. But at the same time, it's that thing that they say on the airplane: put on your own oxygen mask before assisting others, because you have to make sure that you're okay and that you live to fight another day while you're helping other people.
I mean, and that's, we've talked about it, both of us, is like we have this kind of, in our states, we have this idea that like we really, really want to help other people, and we really tend to think that we can do a lot of it, and then sometimes it's almost to a detriment to ourselves, because we end up kind of pushing ourselves further into a hole as well, and especially when it comes from a close family member, and again, I'm really sorry you had to go through all that stuff, and it's really difficult to have someone else hit a rock bottom, if you will, with this disease that we try to cope with, and have it, mess them up, and it kind of in turns internally hurts you as well, because again, it's someone so close to you,
Yeah. It's a little bit almost, depression's not contagious like that, but it feels a little bit contagious. Almost. Where you're being exposed to things that they may be similar to your issues or your issues as well, and then you're being forced to sort of think about them and grapple with them on behalf of another person.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of just tends to bring up, at least for me, my own stuff while I'm trying to work on somebody else's stuff for them. And so that's kind of walking a tightrope where you're like, how much can I help without really hurting myself or depleting all of my already limited energy, because depression makes it hard for you to do your own stuff, whether it's feeding yourself healthy meals or getting up and taking a shower, waking up early. All that stuff is already hard for me, and then it's you feel like I'm being sent in to help somebody else when I'm the least qualified person to do that.
Basically it's a kind of surprise disaster that happens in our lives, and it's almost like a fire broke out in your home, and you want to rush in and save as much as you can, but the longer you're there saving everything that you deem worth saving, it ends up, hurting you more, because you're trying to save everything. And while you may have the ability to do it, sometimes it's not the best idea to do it, and like you said, like with the airplane metaphor, again, you have to put on your own oxygen mask first before you can end up helping someone else. So you had this whole situation happen to you. I mean, like emotionally and like physically, how is it like your body is reacting to like everything that's happened?
Well, I can tell, that it's been hard on me because I'm very tired. I'm very physically tired. I think last time you were talking about that, how you feel just like it's a physical manifestation of what's going on in your brain, as if you can never quite get enough sleep.
Oh yeah.
Last night I slept enough, but I feel like I wake up feeling like I feel like I got hit by a bus. And it's sort of, normally that will sort of fade over time for me, where I get more energetic throughout the day. But I'm just like constantly tired now in a very, like, it feels physically heavy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I appreciate you coming to the podcast and being able to have the energy to come and, talk to us about,
Free therapy.
Yeah, it's free therapy, if you will, guys. I mean, for me, I've been recovering. I mean, because like the last time we talked, I've been kind of recovering from the whole feeling like I've been run over situation. Yeah. I mean, it hit me pretty bad, and I could not accomplish anything. I could not get anything done, and I had to kind of physically will myself out of that state. So much, of course, if you guys noticed, everything is very different from the first couple episodes. I willed myself to want to move forward with stuff and want to actually do things and want to not be tired, even though I sleep enough. Like you said, I still feel tired, but I want to have that still, that drive, and I had to will myself out of it. So, pulled myself out of it and just went in because I wanted to get a bunch of things done for the network, and I wanted to launch some new stuff that's coming for us on the network, the podcast network, and I wanted to keep busy and then like pull myself out of this whole like slump that I was in, where like again, I could sleep 24 hours straight and I would feel like I haven't slept in days, so I'm recovering, and I'm sad that you're on the decline with the physical. Emotionally, like when someone goes through something like this, like for you, how do you feel emotionally, like with this whole situation, like when you see someone as close as you did kind of go through like that rough patch?
I think while it's happening, you almost have sort of a, like, at least for me, I sort of built a barrier around myself where, when I was with her, I was okay because I sort of had my guard up.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can only have your shield up for so long. And so now that I'm back here in Milwaukee, I'm sort of now feeling the effects of how things were for me, because at the time I was just focused on her and how I could help her and stuff like that. And I went into it kind of, I gave myself a talk before I went into it and was like, what are the boundaries that you need to set up here in order to preserve yourself?
Yeah.
But it's sort of like everything feels like it's coming crashing down on me at this point. And I don't regret, going out there to like try and help out and stuff like that. I've been in really bad situations before and had people kind of try to come rescue me or try to, there's no rescuing, but, kind of try to come be with me and make me feel better for a couple of days. And I'm sure that did similar things to them. And so I appreciate that they did that. And I always try to remember that when I'm sent into a situation where I'm trying to help somebody else with similar mental issues to me.
Okay.
But, it takes a toll for a while. But I'm still here and I'm still trying. So
that's good. I mean, again, that's one of the key goals about this, guys. It's sadly, it's one of the few diseases that it's never truly going to go away, but you can make it better for yourself. You can learn to live with it. You can learn to cope with it to a point where you can have you know, a normal life, and it's just whether or not, you know, you're finding ways to do that, you know. And again, I'm finding distractions. I'm trying to pull myself out of the slump, like I said. And, you know, this right here, like everything we're building here, I want to get this podcast up and going. So I mean, like I've been working away trying to get everything up and going as well. And, you know, trying to, you know, spend more time with people I care about and things like that. And I do appreciate you coming out and talking about this stuff. And I guess we can continue a little bit more about like your back, you know, story. And I know that we had talked last time and had really gone into the early days. We went into the early days of everything that happened with you, and you said that you would stop right before what is essentially you called the Great Depression, if you will. So I guess we could start into that if you care to.
Okay. Yeah.
1 second. Okay, so this is where I'm going to put in a cut because that truck came through, and so I'm going to close this window real quick. Okay. And then we're going to come back in, act like nothing happened, right? And then when I edit this video, this part's going to get cut out. Okay.
Do we have to go back to what you said before? Because I think the truck was over.
Essentially, what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-say what I just said in case a cut doesn't seem as clean. Okay? Okay. Of editing. If anything, it'll be like noticeable for like a second.
Yeah, but better than a truck noise.
All right. That is a loud ass truck. Oh, actually.
Oh, because there's another window open.
I should have realized that would happen, but you know, it doesn't always happen. Okay. And then we'll camera and well, I really want to pick back into what we talked about last week and pick up where we left off. We went into kind of your early days of, you know, you realizing what you're dealing with, and you talked about leaving off the podcast right before what you called the Great Depression for you in your life. Yeah. If you'd be willing to share with us, we'd love to know more about your story.
Yeah. Well, I had kind of taken us through my sort of a very fast version of my mental health history. And so we were talking about how it was difficult to make it through college for me. But I did eventually make it through. And I had always assumed that I had a lot of friends that had similar mental issues that ended up needing to take, you know, a semester off or even more off, a year off. And I think if that's the right choice for you, that's a really brave choice to make, and it's a very difficult choice to make. And I was sort of never able to make that decision for myself because I was very much afraid that if I stopped doing school, I would lose the momentum absolutely. And if I didn't have something that I needed to get up and go to, I would just, you know, quit entirely. Yeah. So I was like, no matter what, you're going to finish this in 4 years. Because if you don't finish it now, you're just never going to go back. And so I did finish college, but it had taken so much mental energy out of me and emotional energy that I was very burnt out, which I'm sure is a common experience with school. And I was lucky I wasn't working my way through school or anything like that, but just having, you know, an eating disorder and then depression and anxiety and OCD during school was just like almost so close to too much for me. Yeah. And so afterwards, I didn't really want to start immediately into a new difficult time-consuming job. I kind of just wanted to get, you know, any random job that would pay the bills. And, you know, you can't necessarily afford to live in New York that way. So I decided I was going to move anywhere. And I ended up moving here to Milwaukee. My mom is from Mukwonago, so I'd been to Milwaukee before to go to the art museum and the Betty Brinn and stuff as a child. Yeah. and I didn't necessarily understand what Milwaukee was going to be like, and the real experience that it's like living here. I sort of just had a picture in my head of like, oh, I had been to Milwaukee on some vacations, but it was just familiar enough and then just mysterious enough that I came here sort of on a whim because I was like, I'm going to go anywhere that's not so busy and so full of pressure so that I can just like recuperate for a year. But I ended up staying here, obviously, because I'm still here. But I sort of fell into, like, instead of taking a year and, you know, regenerating myself, which is what I thought was going to happen, I ended up falling into a very deep sort of catatonic depression over a period of probably about a year, that it's difficult to talk about, not because it's so emotional for me, but because I don't remember most of it. It's like my brain blocked off almost everything that happened, either because the suffering was too great or because of literal inflammation and the physical results of depression that happened in my brain, or a little bit of each.
Yeah.
And so I have been told, I have a few memories from the Great Depression. I have also just been told a lot of stuff that happened during it that I fully don't remember, but believe happened.
Okay.
And so it's very strange to lose, an entire year. It got to the point, it wasn't sudden, like I didn't wake up one day and I was like totally catatonic. But I guess it kind of happened over time. It crept up. I was having a good time living in Milwaukee. We moved here during all the festivals. I moved here with my then boyfriend, who's now, still my best friend, but we're not together anymore. And we went to all, Summerfest and all of the ethnic festivals.
Yeah, all the festivals.
And
there's a lot that happens here.
Did all
Milwaukee.
the tourist stuff, and it was fun. And then sort of once that was over, I think that's when the decline began a little bit. And it ended up so bad that I was literally in bed for a lot of the time, just like not moving or barely moving, laying down or sitting up. Like I could not make myself work. I could not even make myself go to doctor's appointments a lot of the time. So it was very difficult, obviously, to help myself in that situation. What I do remember is that it felt like tunnel vision all the time. So I have a few like sort of bright moments, a few moments that I do remember from the time. But then a lot of it is honestly, like what I'm going to tell you is sort of a reconstruction based on stuff that I found out later had happened. And I think it's an interesting thing that the brain does as a coping mechanism to sort of, because you do lose when you're very depressed. Yeah. It's harder to remember things. It's harder to even remember words. And your brain sort of feels like it's less on and like you're less of yourself. But I think a part of it is also that my brain does not allow me to remember parts of that time because it doesn't want to remember it doesn't want to remember those thought patterns and that thought process. That's just like, I want to die all the time. Yeah. So I was very much like I wasn't really moving around or doing anything. I had to literally be taken to the doctor. Tim, who is my ex/best friend, he would take me to the doctor. He would I couldn't feed myself a lot of the time. Like he would have, if I was gonna feed myself, it would be random food like crackers, stuff like that. I'm sure you are familiar with. Everybody has their own sort of depression foods and stuff like that. Mine were really random things. Like I would get obsessed with one food for a while and then only eat that thing and refuse to eat anything else, or just like pick at it. So for a while I ate tiny sandwiches For a while, I ate snow cones. For a while, I ate popcorn.
Okay, I just need to stop for a second. Right. Tiny sandwiches. I'm sorry. I know this is a very it's a serious moment, but I just need to know, what are tiny sandwiches? Did they make a big sandwich and cut it into smaller sandwiches?
I'm glad you asked. I believe it was a turkey sandwich, maybe turkey and ham with a mustard on it and a mayonnaise on the other side. And then it was made of a normal bread, but then cut into very small squares.
Very small squares.
Yes.
The crust on, or
crust off, I believe. Yeah, that's an important question. I think in depression, one doesn't like crusts, I suppose.
Okay.
You know, you guys can tell me if you agree or disagree with that.
Was the bread smashed down?
What's a smashed bread?
So like, okay, so here's a confession I have, right? So when you said tiny sandwiches, right? I did have a moment where I went through almost a similar phase. So it was like ham, right? And a little bit of mayo, and the sliced bread, and I would cut off the crust, right? And I guess, yeah, you're correct. I guess depression equals no crust on sandwiches. Yeah. But I would flatten the sandwich, like the bread and everything, to the point where it's like, oh, it's almost like there's no bread on this, but it's just like encased.
So you're compressing the bread.
I compress the bread so much around the meat that it would be like the flattest sandwich, and it would be like a slim sandwich as I thought of it. And then I would just nibble on that. And then eventually, because I smashed it all down and everything like that, I would eventually think about, I should have another. And then I would do this. I would repeat the same thing. And sometimes I would cut it into triangles, and sometimes it would be squares. But most of the time, it would just be, I'd cut the crust off. It'd be like a big square, but flat.
And you flatten it with your hand?
Most of the time. And I guess it was just like flat. Okay, now I have a flat sandwich.
The contents of the sandwich come out when you do
that? And see, this is the thing, right? That's why I didn't put so much into it, right? Okay. So it was literally like it was like a couple slices of ham, maybe, and then like a very thin spreading of mayo on it, and then like just like it's flattened, very flat, and it'd be the thin sandwich. And like when you had that small sandwich, I was like, oh my god, what's going on here? This is too relatable. No, sorry. Well,
I think this brings up, what's going to have to happen in a future podcast, which is that we make depression food.
Yes, we're gonna have to try it again, and we will have to make it in. We'll make this into a cooking show. Where we make the depressed food.
These might be, culinary genius.
It may be.
We don't know.
We don't know.
There's only one way to
find out. Tribeception. No one knows that yet. Well, I wanted to touch back on real quick. I mean, further back than this. So you had talked about it, like the depression having an effect on your body to the point where like you couldn't remember things, or will not allow you to remember certain things. And I think that's a very key thing to say, where it's, yeah, your body reacts in such a way where you're going down a path of just complete self-harm and self-hate, that your body almost, unbeknownst to you, tries to stem that tide and tries to steer the ship away from like the coming like tidal wave of just self-hate and destruction. I've recently gone through where I have a very hard time like remembering certain things, or even recalling things that have happened in the past. And most of the times, yes, it is like the more bad things that have happened to me. It's just like it's blocking it, and I can't. It's almost like it was a dream, right? Not to the point that like I think it didn't happen. It was the point where you wake up and like for a little bit you know what it is, and then it's gone. And then like it's like, I know I had this dream and it had to do with something, and I just can't remember it. It's very similar to that, where it was, I felt it so vividly and I knew it, and it was like all this whole moment in my life was so dark and so like depressed, and I so much self-hate, and then like that, it's gone. And then it can't recall it like a dream. It's just, you don't remember your dreams half the time, or most of the time. And I think it's very similar to that. I even currently I used to, I think I talked about that I went to culinary school, so maybe that's where thin sandwiches came from. But went to culinary school. I really loved cooking, and I had like so many recipes, and I kept them in my head. And I now, at this point in my life, I have a very, very hard time recalling a lot of those recipes of mine that I had came up with. And I just, for some reason, it's like even things like that where it's like, I know this, I know this, I've made this 100 times. I can't think of it now. And it's like, it's a foreign thing to me. It's like I de-learned it,
Yeah.
and that's what happens. And I guess it's kind of collateral damage, I guess. It affects you, not only things blocking the bad things, but also sometimes blocks things that you normally remember, or and that's why that's why it's always like when we talk about like, oh, it's an accomplishment to just get up and take a bath or something like that. It was like, well, yeah, because sometimes we forget, and it's
Yeah.
like, it's not that we're want to forget it, it's just sometimes we don't do it,
Yeah.
and it just never comes across our mind, even though we know from very little, like it's ingrained in our minds. It's like, oh, the day is, you do this, take a bath, go to bed. It's like, nope, that's gone. It's really weird. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry for interrupting. Please,
Oh no.
go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me, and I think a lot about the fact that I can't remember, and I know that there are, scientific and physiological reasons that I can't remember, but then I also do believe in some sense that it's just a self-preservation, that my brain does not want me to go back, because at the time I believed very strongly that it was rational, super rational, and the only solution to want to die. And for most of the time, I was not necessarily actively suicidal. I was just like, I wish that I could go to sleep forever and never wake up. And I assumed sort of that if I could just lay in bed in the dark and not really feed myself long enough, that my body would start to shut itself down and that I would just naturally die. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of what I wanted, and what the plan was just
to wither away.
Yep, exactly. Just don't do anything, and eventually your desire to die will make you die.
Yeah, and it's also a very scary thing as well, because like when you come across people who are depressed, a lot of times when they want to say how they would like to just go away, or just end off their life and not be around, a lot of times when you ask them, it's like, well, I mean, how did you picture it happening? It's like, I kind of wish I could just wither away or disintegrate it away into just nothing. It's a common, very common thing. It's like, I just want to be shut off from everything, and I want like just to disintegrate into nothing if I could. I wish I could Thanos myself out of here, if I will, if that's what the word is. And it's really weird, and how like common, how much in common all of us have, and I at least I hope so. Maybe it's just me and her, just weird. I don't know, but
sandwiches.
Depression sandwiches. I want that on a T-shirt. We're gonna put it one day. Depression sandwiches. But yeah, it's scary at the same time, where everyone has a different thing that they're dealing with, but it's like a cold, or like the flu. You have very similar symptoms, right? Yeah. And sometimes sometimes someone gets a very strong strain of it where they end up wanting to cause major harm, or they want to, like, they get into different types of depression, where it's like, oh, OCD depressed, or manic depressed, where like, oh, I'm super high energy but I'm depressed, or there's a lot of different types, but there are very like subtle similarities across the board, and it's a scary thing.
Yeah. So I, like I was saying, I couldn't really, like, I laid in bed a lot of the time in the dark, which I think is a common, thing that depressed people do, where for some reason the light is too bright for them.
Yeah, you become a vampire.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you just, if you're sleeping crazy hours because you're sleeping too much, but you're also not sleeping. And so, you're awake during the day, and then I have blackout curtains. I remember that I think it was my mom sent me a happy light. So one of those, I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're supposed to do sort of a light therapy on you where you have it on and you have it on certain times of day for a certain amount of time, and it's supposed to chemically make you happier. Like it simulates the sun in a way that's supposed to be good for you.
I have not. You know what? I have not encountered one of these. Does it
maybe that would heal you?
Is it like a weird like mechanical box that just like
no? It's
starts playing some weird like happy music or something? Or
it's
here
almost
comes
like
the sun, and it's like bright light on you, chemical spray in your face, and
we
it's
should
like
try
be
that.
happy.
But no, it's more like the expensive Philips alarm clocks that do a sunrise. It's sort of more like those where it's a circular, very friendly, plain circular light.
Okay.
But they call it a happy light, and I misused it. First of all, very aggressively. I did not use it the way you were supposed to use it. I think this might be for if you're just a little bit depressed. And at that point, I was way too deep in the rabbit hole. But I would use that and a lighted mirror, and I would just sit in pretty much a pitch black room, but like picking at my face. Because at the time, like that was, I've always picked at things as a stress habit.
Yeah.
And I don't have trike like hair pulling, but I pick at my face and stuff like that. And so at certain times during the depression, I would just sit in like a pitch black room with like the happy light and the lighted mirror and pick at my face. So I really, really misused that happy light. That is not how that was intended. But so I have a memory of that. And I have a memory that I know that my sister came out to visit me on Thanksgiving. And I know that my best friend Jackie came to visit me. And when she came out to visit me, I was like, she knew what was going on, and I had sort of warned her. And I had trouble brushing my hair a lot during that time, but I had unfortunately bleached my hair blonde right before getting super depressed. And so it really dried my hair out, and it was very tangly all the time. And I just had like knots in my hair, like crazy knots. And I know that that's a common thing too with depressed people, where it becomes difficult to like brush your hair out and do simple stuff like that. And then it builds up to an uncontrollable situation where now you have all these knots in your hair that literally take hours for somebody else to comb out, or like can even need to be cut out and stuff like that. So there were a lot of physical manifestations of what was going on for me at the time. I remember that I remember being like sleeping through a lot of doctor's appointments where, Tim would try to wake me up and be like, you have a doctor's appointment today. And the whole day before a therapist or like a psych appointment, the whole day before that was just me stressed, like crippling amounts of stress about going to a therapist. I had a couple different doctors at the time. I was put on a couple different types of medication. None of them really seemed to do anything for me in a major way. I didn't get bad side effects, but I didn't really get good effects either. And I maxed out on a couple of medications where, you start low and then they build you up if it's not helping you enough. But then once you hit sort of a maximum level, you're supposed to switch to another medication or add something because that's the maximum that your body can take. So I maxed out on a couple things. And I can't even, now I have to look up what I took because at the time I knew it, but now I don't even remember the names of what I took. And so when I'm talking to other people who are depressed now who are on medication, I'm like, I'm always like a little too curious about what they're taking because I'm trying to figure out what it was that I had taken. And so, medication wasn't really helping. I had a couple of therapists. I was told that one of my doctors told me, oh, you are depressed because you don't have a job. If you just get a job, then you won't be depressed anymore. And I like sobbed in that guy's office. That was terrible advice for me at the time.
Really?
And I wanted to be like, I wanted to stand up for myself and say, no, I don't have a job because I'm depressed. Like, because I was like, believe you me, I really want to have a job and be normal and do all that stuff, but I can't make myself. And it was kind of, to me, it felt like he had given me the advice of like, have you tried not being sad? Like, have you tried being normal? Because being normal would make you not depressed.
Yeah. And by all means, guys, like if you're, I think that like something like that right there, like sometimes scares people away from like trying to seek help or trying to like, because like, oh, it's just not going to work, or like therapy doesn't work. I was like, let's not go that far yet. I mean, there are certain therapists and there are certain doctors that can help you, right? It's just there are different versions of everything that we have, and there are different people and different doctors that can help out. So it's all about finding the one that best suits you. And I do want to stress that if you do see a therapist and it doesn't work out with that one simply because you're not feeling like a kinship with this therapist, or it's not vibing with them, if you will, I would not just like say cut it out of your life completely. I would say like if you can give it another shot, try another doctor, or maybe even ask that doctor if there's someone else that like maybe better suited. I mean for what you're dealing with, because it's the best thing that you can do if you're trying to seek help and if you're in the therapist's office, like you've already sought help, you already sought it out, and so the key thing is like not giving up on yourself, so
yeah, keep that momentum going if you're at one doctor,
yeah, I mean
it's
you got
switch to another one than to stop going.
Yeah, it's way easier to switch to another one than it is to start going in the first place.
Exactly.
So if you're there already and you're trying it out, don't give up if it's not vibing for you, because there are different people vibe with different people. It's just like normal life. There are some people that you really vibe with and become friends with or become close with, and there are some people who are just like, well, you're a person, you sure are, and I wish you all the best, but sometimes you just don't vibe and gel. So don't give up on yourself ever. Just if you're already there, or if you're thinking about it, understand that it's not a for sure thing, but you can't give up. And that, I mean, you can't stress it enough.
Yeah. And that's something that's obviously very difficult in the moment when you're a depressed person.
Yeah.
And you're like, you've put all this hope into going to a medical professional, and you're like, okay, maybe this will, like, it was extremely hard for me to get here, to get an appointment, to figure out what works with my health insurance or what I can pay for. And then you get there and they are, they say something that's harmful to you by accident, or, you don't feel anything with them, or they're suggesting things that you're like, that's not going to work for me. And it's obviously, when you're in that position, you have very limited energy and emotional energy, and then to kind of have your hopes up about something, or have like worked so hard for days to get yourself to an appointment, and then it can be crushing, to feel like, oh, I did all of this and this isn't working, this isn't going to work. But you just have to try to, and for me it was that I had an incredible support system. That once I left the office crying and explained what had happened, Tim was like, I'll find you a different doctor, then we're not going back to that one. And I don't necessarily know that advice was wrong in a blanket way, because right now for me, my job definitely keeps me going. And even though it doesn't solve the depression, it absolutely provides sort of an outlet and a purpose for me. But it was the wrong advice because it was not right for me at that time. Because it was not the right thing to say to a person who was so critically depressed that they couldn't make themselves find a job. And I don't know that doctor knew that, but it wasn't the right person for me, and it wasn't the right advice for me at that time. And so I had to move on. And so the hope is that you can find the strength to advocate for yourself and try again, even though it seems obviously very crushing if you don't get it on like the first shot or the second shot.
Yeah, and the thing is, when you're searching, if you are in the midst of searching someone out, that's, again, it's a great step, and it's a great move forward. And if you're seeking some help and you're seeking out like a therapist to help you out, again, ask questions. Just you can ask them personally before you even meet them. Just, do you specialize in the depression, or you specialize in this type of depression? Is, if not, do you know someone who does? Can you recommend someone if you don't think you're better suited to handle this? Because I need to vibe with somebody. Again, you're trying to better yourself, and you don't want to just like rush into anything as well. So, yeah, I mean, please continue.
So I've been telling this story a little bit disjointedly, but it's sort of the best that I can patch together.
Yeah.
And probably every couple of weeks, because I still, Tim does not live in Milwaukee anymore. We were roommates for a while after we broke up. Because actually at the time of the depression, we were already not together, but living together. And probably every couple of weeks, he'll bring something up that's like a memory from the past, and especially from that time. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Because he'll bring up like a joke or something that I had eaten, and I'm still finding out stuff from what happened. And I remember that I had been, like I said, very immobile, and my muscles had obviously started to atrophy. So it's super weak too. And, I got advice from doctors like, well, why don't you exercise more? And it's like, once you sort of start down that path where your muscles aren't working anymore, it's very hard to come back from that. And so while that's good advice in the sense that, yes, it would be better if I was doing that, that was another thing that I wasn't able to make myself do at the time.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of forgive yourself for the things that are obvious advice, like eat better, work out, have a job, go in the sunlight. But sometimes you can't make yourself do that, and you feel bad about it. Like you feel stupid, like, well, if I just did these really easy things that everybody else is doing, maybe I would be better. But I could not make myself. And I remember it was the middle of winter, and it had snowed a bunch, and we lived in the lower half of a duplex, so we were responsible for shoveling snow. And my parents were visiting for Christmas, but I was still spending a lot of time sort of locked in my own room away from them, sleeping or just sitting in the dark, pretending to sleep. And I got up all of a sudden and put on some coats and layers and went out, and I shoveled snow out of the walkway for 3 hours straight, which everybody was like, you shouldn't be doing that. You can't suddenly go outside in freezing temperatures when you've been laying down for months and expect your body to work that way. But I didn't want to stop because I had suddenly gotten a burst of life again. And so I just shoveled snow for 3 hours. And Tim and my parents and my sister were like, what is going on? And I remember that. And there's just a lot of darkness around that memory. That's a bright spot. And then, and then I have no memory again for another couple months. And I know that, or at least I've been told that at the time I was very sorry. And I still kind of vaguely remember this emotion, that I knew what was going on, and I knew that it was something that was broken with my brain, and that I was just super sorry that everybody had to deal with me that way and see me that way, and that people were sort of what I thought of as wasting all this time supporting me and literally feeding me and taking care of me, when I felt like I didn't deserve it, and a normal person shouldn't. I thought, a normal person shouldn't need this level of care, but then also that I don't even deserve this level of care. And so I was very sorry at the time. And I do distantly remember that emotion. And then I was also, I don't remember this either, But Tim will say that I was very funny. Like sometimes I would get bursts where I would be like dancing around and making jokes and stuff like that. And humor has definitely always been a coping mechanism for me.
Yeah.
So that seems very likely. But again, I don't super remember it. And I do know that I remember feeling sort of very like weepy all the time. And that's something that still happens to me now, where just sometimes when I'm depressed, I'll be like pretty normal, like I'm functional, like I'm walking around, but stuff makes me cry really easily. And it's not like an emotional cry where I feel sad during the crying. It's just like tears are leaking out of my face. And so I was like just this like weepy ghost of a person that had picked at her face a lot. But I do remember that sometimes I would go out in public and definitely feel like super like a freak. Like I looked like, why am I this person that has like scabs all over her face and then like tears leaking out of her eyes and like knots in her hair in front of everybody else? And I remember being filled with a sense of sort of like immense bravery during the times that I did go outside like that, because I knew in my mind, everybody was staring at me. I don't know how much people were actually staring at me. I do know that I objectively did look like that. There's pictures of me and stuff. But so I remember sort of a couple strong emotions from the time, but then a lot of it is blank. Chip readers came out while I was depressed.
Okay.
And when I came out of the depression and I was trying to buy stuff at stores, I was like, what's this? And everybody knew about chip readers because they'd come out over a period of time. And so like everybody had interacted with them before. But I was just like, I don't understand. I'm not supposed to swipe, or I put the thing in the thing. And it was like baffling for me because I had missed, or people would talk about all these movies that had come out. And I was like, I didn't know that this came, like I didn't know there was a sequel. I missed the first Guardians movie. And then I came out and everybody was like, I am Groot. And I was like, what is a chip reader and what is a Groot? And so it's just like it's a blank patch, and I still don't fully understand how I came out of it. My sister was studying abroad in Europe at the time, and my parents offered to, I'd sort of like started to wake up a little bit. I had a really good friend who sent me like depression and agoraphobia books from Minnesota, and she sent them to me and we would do a book club together. And I remember that. But then I had sort of started to like wake up a little bit where there were more signs of life in me. And my parents offered to pay for me to go visit my sister while she was studying abroad. And it was super sudden. Like she was leaving and finishing her program really soon. And so it was like I was supposed to leave in a couple days if I wanted to go. And I was like, okay. And Tim helped me pack. And so it was almost like I was asleep for a year. And then I got up very suddenly and went to visit my sister in Europe and was like alive again. Like that's when my memories start. It's almost like your first memories from when you're a baby, you're like, I don't remember anything. And then I remember suddenly consciousness. It's like it was a sort of a rebirth in that I remember consciousness all over again when I went to visit Katie. And then I got back and got a job, and I still work there. And I have no explanation, and it wasn't therapy and it wasn't medication. It was that I just woke up one day, went to Europe, came back, got a job, and then, not was fine because I'm still very much depressed and it still, fights against me. But to go from being catatonic to being like super functional in a very sudden way, I still have no idea how that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very weird thing when it's again, it's almost like you're in auto mode or something like that. It's all the necessary things for brain function shut down, and you just kind of just coast through the time, and you don't remember anything that happened.
Yeah.
I've gone through weekends where I was like, I'm not going out, and I'm just gonna wrap myself up and turning off everything, and I'm just gonna auto mode through it. I don't remember anything that happened that weekend. I don't remember whether I ate or whether I didn't eat. It's something that just kind of creeps up, and that one, right? The Great Depression, as you call it. Yeah, that's something that, like, eventually it may happen to someone out there where it just totally shuts you down from everything and pulls you out of everything. And like, I feel like if I didn't have everything that I have already going on and I had to transition to something else, like, I would probably shut down.
Yeah.
As well. And I'm just lucky that I'm surrounded by a bunch of really great friends, and just this podcast that we do, and the network, and just already having been in a job for a while, that, like, even though I wish that I was like, I don't want to be here, but at the same time it's like, well, it's keeping me distracted and going. And
yeah, there's enough moving parts around you that it's sort of hard to let them all fall away. But I think, part of the situation that engendered for me being able to fall into that depression, and I don't mean this in like a blame way or anything, but because I had moved to a new city where I had less of a support system, knew less of what was going on, and was sort of like a tourist here, but with no immediate responsibilities, that sort of was probably part of how it happened. Although I don't want to say how I let it happen or anything like that. Like, because it's easy to blame yourself and be like, oh, it's your fault because you didn't set up a life around you. That's how you got so sad. And, that's not how it works. But
yeah, again, sometimes it just becomes difficult with what we cope with here, just to do very, like, simple things. And then when you are trying to better yourself and you're trying to make things better in your life, sometimes the transition is the roughest part. And for you, I mean, it looks like that eventually, like, your body got through the transition, and now you're in, like, where you were going to try and be, where you're, I'm gonna go to another city, I'm gonna get a job there, I'm just, like, gonna just live there, right?
Yeah.
And now this is where you are. So, like, that transitional period was, like, the very rough spot because of just, like, I need to go there, and then I need to set up everything. But setting up everything in our state,
starting over is
very difficult.
Yep.
Because even when we're by ourselves, it's just like, oh, I don't want to get up. Oh, I know I have to go pay this bill. It's like, nah, I can't do it. The phone's right there. I don't need to do it. But I'm just gonna stay on this couch. Or I need to go grab food from the store. Well, I got a box of Cheerios. I can feed off of that for another week, maybe. I don't know if I spread it out. And you go in survival mode, and then it just that's what happens. But it, again, what you went through was not like it's a normal thing that can happen to us. And again, you can't, like you said, you out there, if you guys are dealing with the same thing, or you feel like you're going through the same thing, you can't blame yourself for that, even though you want to. And that's the whole point of, like, when you shut yourself off from people, when you throw yourself in a dark room and close all the blinds and wrap yourself in your blanket and you just lay in your bed all day. That's like the very key. That's a very just, oh, if no one sees me, I don't exist, and you already don't want to exist. And so, like, the easiest thing is, like, I'm in the dark, no one can see me, means that I'm just floating away, and that's what I want. But that's not really what you want. That's what this disease wants you to do, and it's it's about trying to cope with it.
Well, and I would do a strange thing while I was so sad, where I made a bunch of social media posts, but I have a bunch of Instagrams from the period talking about and being open about, like, the picking, especially. Like, there's photos on my Instagram of my face all picked at, because even though I was, like, so cripplingly ashamed and didn't want to go outside and didn't want to be seen and didn't want anyone to look at me and didn't want to feel those eyes on me, there was, like, a separate part of me that was like, it's very important that I share this experience with other people so that maybe they're suffering a little less. if they see someone else like that also is picking at their face.
Yeah.
And so there was a part of me that was always like in there and like fighting really hard and very brave and very alive and like trying to be open with people and even like just open with the social media world at large about what was happening to me. And then there was like a separate subjective me that was like, you should die, you should just die.
Yeah. No, you know, I
And
mean,
I'm glad that the fighting part of me, you know,
won out in
stayed
the end.
there and won out. And when I came out of the depression and I got back from Europe, I had lost so much of my motor skills and my memory and my social skills, where I couldn't think of a lot of big words. I couldn't think of how to express myself. I felt really awkward around people, being seen by them. And I was like, what job can I get that will force me to make mistakes really publicly and, use my memory and grow my social skills back? And because I'd always been a very outgoing person before, and then I was just suddenly like, just wanted no one to look at me and no one to be near me.
Yeah.
And I was like, what job can I get that will force me to use all of this stuff and rebuild all of these muscles and even my physical muscles? And so that's how I ended up being a server at first, because you have to go up to a table where you don't know anybody, talk to them, introduce yourself, have memorized their orders or have memorized the menus and the beers and stuff like that, and then physically lift the food over. And it was all stuff that it was sort of all the skills that I had lost that I wanted to regain. And that's kind of how I ended up working at a restaurant. It was a way to get back everything that I knew that I had lost.
Yeah.
And I haven't fully gotten back everything, in the sense that I'm still clumsier than I was before the depression. I wasn't clumsy at all. Now sometimes I like knock into things randomly, or I'll like just be holding my phone and then my hand lets go and it just drops it.
Yeah. I've I've smacked myself in the face with my phone, just being very clumsy with it. And I had never, before me getting really like bad off recently, I'd never done that before. But like there was moments where I'm not even like laying down. It's not like above me or anything like that. It would just be like a moment where like I'll slip up and I'll try to catch it, and like I slap myself in the face with the phone as I like hit it up. I'm like, oh, this is like a comical thing of errors, and I'll have a black eye and probably or something, and it almost it becomes just a weird version of yourself. It's,
and I'm sorry to be laughing, but it's also kind of the things that I think for both of us we find the funny moments and the light moments in how absolutely absurd this Yikesland really is.
Yeah, and that's the point where, welcome to Yikesland. Everything is just god awful for us, but at the same time there's a whimsical absurdity to it. And like we said before, it's a funny thing to be coping with something that just makes you feel so alone, and that there are so many people dealing with this at the same time, and then there are so many similarities that everyone, deals with it, but it will make you believe that you're the only one dealing with it. And at the same time, like I think one of the things I'd like to talk about next time when we get together is just how different you see yourself when you fall into that deep hole. Like for you, like you have bits and pieces of just you coming out of it, like in the Great Depression, as you and for me, I think I brought it up before. It was like I feel like that I'm looking at the version that I want it to be in a mirror, right? And I see that version, but I'm like blocked from getting to that version, and that's me. And the person that I am here right now isn't actually me. It's just this empty shell that's being possessed by this whole depression. It's it's got me locked away. I switched places with the person in the mirror, and I think that's a thing that I'd like to talk about next time, where it's like just how different you become and how much it changes you when it does take over, but I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you talking openly about this, and hopefully those of you who are listening and watching along with us can relate to things that either of us have dealt with. And again, we don't mean to eventually poke fun at it. I mean, at the same time, like it's how we cope with it, and hopefully you can as well, and hopefully you find some happiness in our kind of poking fun at our own, our own disabilities here, and hopefully you can relate to us as well. Again, thank you so much, and I don't see you as a person who's just like lost like you were at that point. I see you as a person who's open about it, who's very like strong, trying to move forward from it, and I don't think yourself as any less than that. Okay. Because this whole situation that we deal with, it's just yikes, right, guys? So thank you guys so much for joining us here on the podcast. I think that's a nice good chunk of a podcast for you guys out there. You can visit us at our Twitter page. That's at Yikesland. Yes, we have at Yikesland on Twitter. So please tweet at us there. Subscribe to, follow us on there. We'd love to interact with you guys as a community. You guys can also send us any topic ideas or questions or comments to our email. That's yikesland@gmail.com. Again, Yikesland is all one word. So, just join us and interact with us, guys. We want to hear from you guys, and we want to keep creating this content for you guys as well, and kind of be open about it. It's there, like you said, it's free therapy for us, right? So, any final thoughts from you?
No, I just appreciate, you guys being here and listening to my story, and hopefully, while I was going through it, I thought I am the only person on earth that is going through this thing. But that's not true. It's a lie that your depression tells you. And even though everybody's story is unique, there's definitely a lot of common threads. There's even a lot of common threads between Jelani's experience and mine. So, hopefully the more that we talk about depression and anxiety and OCD and eating disorders and every other thing that can go quote unquote wrong in your brain, the more we can remind ourselves that it's okay to be this way and forgive ourselves for being that way. And then, you work towards a better day, but your progress is not always going to be linear, and that's okay too.
Yeah, it is. And if you feel the need to talk to somebody, even if you want, again, you guys can email us, tweet at us, you can talk to us if you need to, or talk to somebody. But if you feel very close to the edge and you feel you're going to a dark place, there's always help out there, confidential, and it's free. Just pick up the phone if you need immediate help. Just call the suicide National Suicide Prevention Hotline. You guys call 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. And again, you can get help as well if you're feeling just really close to the edge, guys. We don't want to hear you any more people out there. We don't want to lose you guys. Every day that you're here with us is a good day, because we are coping together and we are trying to move on together. So this has been your host, Jelani Hoon, along with host
Kris Fung.
And enjoy some life out there, guys, and have fun in Yikesland. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys. Thanks for being here.